My name's Scott Herrold, and I'm the Chief of Programming for Hope Media Group. We have a bunch of different radio stations all over the country. I'm actually based out of Nashville, Tennessee. We have radio stations all throughout the South and in Florida, Tennessee, the Carolinas, Texas as well, Kansas, Portland. We're kind of all over the place. And so I actually started working in radio. My high school in Metro Detroit had a 250 watt radio station. And so my senior year of high school, I was the program director of that. I think my freshman year, I tried out and just did some sports casts and read some news, and they let me on the team and just kind of grew from there. And then by my senior year, I was thinking I could get a job like waiting tables at a restaurant, or I could go cut the grass, or I could get a job at a radio station since I've been working at the station. So I just started applying and ended up getting a job. It was kind of cool.
You mind if that's awesome, but do you mind if we jump into some student questions? Because we only got you for a little bit because we know it's kind of late for our Eastern European kids. So one of the kids asked, they had emailed, what qualities do you think are essential for success as a radio broadcaster? And you as the program director, how do you cultivate those qualities in a broadcaster?
Yeah, I think the first thing is just a solid work ethic, that you have a can-do attitude, that you're willing to do whatever it takes to just do the basic things, to not feel like, hey, I'm too good to do something basic. If someone's asking me to dub off some audio or to shoot a quick video or to just sit here and update social media while a DJ's on the air, or just help with the DJ or loading voice tracks into an automation system. It's like all those things are just skills. It's like, you're making a playlist on Spotify or Apple Music and you're dragging in a bunch of songs, but we have people that are doing those things and they're tightening up segs so that the music's flowing, and you're willing to do whatever it takes. I think that's where it starts. And then you just spend time with the on-air personalities or the podcast talent, and you ask them to show you how to do production, you show you how to edit, show you how to, how to speak and put together a show and put together content. I think when it comes to actual, skills, I think, learning like the Adobe Creative Suite, like learning, the video editing tools and the audio editing tools. We use Adobe Audition for a lot of the radio stations have been using that for years. Or, you can use Logic Pro on a Mac, or you can use Pro Tools, will do a similar sort of thing. There's also a free program called Audacity that you can get, and it's a really good free editing tool if you just want to learn how to edit and make production, like make promos, make commercials, make a podcast, and create. That's a free option versus if you're paying monthly to have like the Adobe Creative Suite. But I mean, there's so many YouTube videos out there you can watch that will show you how to edit and put things together, and so many free tutorials that you can do. That's where I would start, because if you can edit, and you can edit audio, it's not much different than editing video, and vice versa. It's just with or without the pictures. But I would encourage you to spend some time with the Adobe Creative Suite and learn some of those software programs.
And that's a great suggestion, the Audacity and Adobe. That's where it's at. And you made the great point, because I went to school for broadcasting, but that editing audio and editing video, there's a lot of synergies there.
Yeah, so and a lot of our companies now are doing both. I happen to lead a bunch of radio station brands, but the first floor of our building is all radio. The second floor upstairs is our video content team. And so when we have radio personalities, we're also shooting video, or we're bringing artists that you listen to through wayfm.com or through hopeondemand.com, and you're recording those sort of things. We do it all here. We put them on the radio, and we take them upstairs and we record video and put content that we put on our web platforms and in podcasts, or we'll put those on social media sometimes while the DJ's on. on. So there's video content while they're on the air, and you can kind of bring some synergy together for listening to the radio and then going a little deeper online with us.
That's great. That's great stuff. And that brings us to our next question. One of the kids, they wanted to know, how do you guys, you as the program director, how do you guys keep your content fresh and engaging for your listeners? Like, what is there ever a time where you guys run out of ideas? Like, how do you keep it going?
Well, every day there's new things happening in the news, and I always say life is show prep. And so, you use the voice memo or the notes, or you could use Evernote or something like that on your phone, and you just write down some of the silly situations you have in your life, just typical life stories and things that you're doing. Like you're at the grocery store and it's, say, before Memorial Day weekend, and you know how crazy it's going to be, and everybody's loading up with trying to get some fresh meat and some fresh produce for barbecuing and grilling over that weekend. But the parking lot's packed, the lines are long, and you talk about the things that you observe, and then you just sort of exaggerate those and have fun with it. Like, instead of just like sitting in the parking lot or having a traffic jam with all the shopping carts, you talk about how you're playing Tetris in the aisles, with all the shopping carts, or you exaggerate like the $147 for a carton of eggs, and you just kind of use odd numbers, and you just use a little bit of exaggeration. You take a fun story and you just give it a little bit of a twist and something that's unexpected. Use a little bit more verbs and less adjectives, and it kind of just makes your brain overload past all the predictable. And you just look for those lifestyle situations. But every day before I do a radio show, I'm going online, and I've got a certain group of different websites that I'm looking through, and I'm just trying to look and see what fresh things have been happening overnight or in the last couple of days. And when I see an interesting news story or a good news story, something that's sort of like a positive story about someone helping someone else, or an Uber driver that goes and delivers something and notices someone had a heart attack and was in their house and saves them and takes them to the ambulance, or police officers that were actually caught doing something awesome rather than just, arresting someone, they find somebody on the side of the road and they decide to bless them instead. When you see those stories, you save those. And I have a file like on my computer that when I find those things, I just copy and paste right in there in like a Word document. And then I can go back and I'll save the link, and I can go back later when I'm doing my show and try to find angles. And what we do with that is we actually I'll call them idea starters. It's like every news story, if you can come, there's always the low-hanging fruit, on those things where you're just reading the story basically verbatim, and then you're putting it in your own words. But then it's like, okay, how do I reach for the higher fruit in that tree? How do I reach for a different angle that's a little more connective, or it's a little more personal? And then there's usually, like, you start with where you're like, what's a better angle than this? Let's try another one. Let's try another one. And then you go, wait, that's the angle. And it's like the human side of things when you're digging into a story of something that's going on. I mean, it's like March Madness was just going on with the Final Four recently. And so you think about those stories, and you could talk about basketball, or you could talk about your favorite team that won, or you could talk about the lady in your office or the teacher that you had who picked the teams based off of the colored jerseys she liked. And then she beat all of us in the brackets because she picked teams that nobody would have thought would have been in the Final Four. And then you talk about that, or you talk about the coach that went crazy and just the funny little shenanigans that happen with the team, or the stories of someone whose family has never gone to college, and the person never played basketball until they were a freshman in high school, and that was the first time they ever threw a ball at a hoop, and then just realized, hey, swish, 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 I can do this. And then you find a story about human nature, and that's like going from the basic low-hanging fruit was talking about basketball, but then talking about the humanity, talking about the people, talking about the settings, talking about the weird situations, talking about teamwork, or some little school that you'd never heard of, and now they just got $1 million grant to build out a new program because the NCAA noticed, and people started following their school, and then you find that there's more to those stories than just a basic news story. Look at the setting. Look at the people and the characters. Look at the conflict and the triumph. It's like any good story has conflict. It's not just, here's a nice person and nice things happen to them. It's like, that's not a story that you remember and you're going to go and tell someone about when you get to school and say, hey, did you hear about Did you hear about this Florida man story where this guy tried to wrestle a gator and the guy wanted to be a dentist and he ripped out a gator's tooth and he took it to his professor for extra credit because the professor made a joke about it. And the guy actually did it because he's crazy. And you go, what? The guy was going to dental school and he ripped out a tooth of an alligator because his professor was talking about it in class and he took it seriously. And you find an angle on that and you go, okay, what's the craziest encounter you ever had with a wild animal? And then people call and they share just ridiculous stories about how wild animals just ran across their yard, or some kind of coyote jumped the fence and tried to attack their dog, and then their cat came out and scared the coyote off. And you find these just silly, stupid stories, but as you tell them and you exaggerate it a little bit and you just kind of take a funny little angle that just amplifies it, you find that the storytelling is what makes the difference. And that's what makes podcasters really level up to that next level. The ones that are the best storytellers, those are the ones that we remember.
You just answered like 5 questions. So thank you for that. So what I like about Hope Media and the stuff that you've done in the past, obviously I've known you from SOS Radio, is that not only are you guys good at improving, pretty much anyone on radio, if you want to be successful in broadcasting, you have to be good at improvisation. But also you guys are faith-based, so there's obviously a positive message, where our news nowadays is very saturated with negativity, and I like how you guys bring a lot of positivity to the world. So thank you for your work with that. And guys, we'll have a link to Hope Media in this video, but we'll keep rolling with some questions before we let you go. So, and guys, keep either emailing or sending them in the chat to me. Somebody wanted to know, what is the process of preparing for a broadcast? What are some challenges you face when going live on air?
Okay. Yeah. So my entire career has been live. It's just like, you turn on that mic and you're live, and it's just like public speaking, or it's just like being in a play. And it's just like, you have a soundboard in front of you, and that's your stage. And it's just like talking to the person, talking to that microphone. A lot of us will train somebody where we'll get like a little stuffed animal or a squishy or some sort of little like character. I'm trying to think if I have one. I have one right here. Okay. I have a Cheshire cat and a minion. Okay. You set that right you set that right next to your soundboard, and you talk to that one thing. When you're on the air, you don't talk to an audience like where you're thinking there's a million people listening, where there probably are. But when you look and you speak to one person and you make it personal, or one little minion, and you set that there and you talk to that one person, that's how you make it personal. And then when you want to get into storytelling, you tell it to one person, like it's that one person who's driving in their car. It's that one person that's sitting at their office that's just totally stressed out because they got out of a meeting, and they're like, I need to pull up my playlist and just hear some songs that are going to encourage me. And the more that we can just look and say, I'm going to speak to one person, one thing, like we'll literally a lot of times put something on our desk and we'll talk to that when we're in the microphone, because we're by ourselves. A lot of times we're doing a solo show, unless you have a team show and you're talking to one another. But that's a big part of it. Prep wise, there's actually a really cool service. It's called creativecardio.com, and it's a show prep service that gives you idea starters for your radio show. And there's different services you can subscribe to like that. We call them show prep services, but usually, it's something, like a monthly fee or a yearly fee. And then you have access to a website. And sometimes there's Facebook groups or social media groups where there's other personalities sharing ideas on that. And so it's like finding the story of the day of something that's going on, and you go, well, how am I going to talk about that? Like in Nashville last week, we had that shooting at the Covenant School, which is terrible. And obviously, when you're on the air, you're going to talk about the news part of it. But then the next day, when it hits close to home in your city, you're talking about the people, you're talking about the place, you're talking about the setting, you're talking about the heroes. It was Mr. Rogers says, when there's tragedy, always look for the heroes. And if we can share the stories of the heroes, we can speak to the triumph. We can speak to the police officers that responded faster to that event than like any of the tragedies that we've seen in years. But because they were trained, because they were focused, because they're like, hey, this is our city and we're going to show up and we're here to serve and protect. So when we're laying out like a radio show, usually do what I call a rundown, and it's kind of like a show prep sheet. And I basically have a Microsoft Word document, and I'm going through the week and I'm just finding different pieces of content. Now, I usually start with like, what are the stories of the day, like things that are fresh, that have happened this week, that are relevant and current, that I can talk about. Something that might have happened locally, something that's topical that we could just build a discussion about, or something that that just was a good human interest story, but happened recently, that ties into this week, this month, now that we're in April. Then I look for seasonal things. Like I have a topic on there. I put what's on her mind, because we're targeting a female with our radio station who's about 35 to 45 years old. That's our target demographic that we're trying to reach. So we're trying to frame things through how we reach that person and how we speak to her one-on-one. And so what's on her mind this week? And so I'm thinking, okay, as it is, I'm going to pull up my rundown from just this week that I was just going through. But let's see here. It's April. So things like April showers bring May flowers, where I live in Nashville, Tennessee. March Madness was one. Let's see, Easter, Good Friday, springtime, allergies. How do you keep your lawn looking great without spending $1 million and mowing it twice a week and spending 3 hours outside with the edger and the weed whip and the lawnmower? You think about prom coming up, and spring dances and spring plays and spring sports, soccer season, baseball season, soccer practice, and the family dynamic of divide and conquer. After you get home from school, you do your homework, you rush to get everything done, and the next thing you know, it's practically dinner time, and you've got to go to your practice. And so your mom is dropping you off somewhere, and then they're dropping your little brother off somewhere else on the other side of town, and you're all just kind of driving around and trying to have dinner and do a family dinner once or twice a week if you're lucky. And then you find out you're in the drive-through a lot more often than that. It's finding stories like that and the human interest part of things. Then there's the personal stories that I put in that rundown, little things that have happened to me that I can say, does this resonate with someone else? And I was trying to hang a picture. My wife wanted a mirror redone in our bathroom in this house that we bought, and it just had this ugly mirror just fastened to the wall. So I took it down. I've got to fill these big holes. You end up ripping it out and makes a bigger hole. And I got to fill this hole. I got to patch drywall. It's like, man, for me, nothing's easy, right? It's like, I thought this was going to be 2 seconds. I could just pull this out, fill this hole, and we'll be good to go. I can hang a new mirror. It rips it out. I got to patch it. Takes me all day, waste my whole Saturday. And I'm like, am I the only one that these DIY projects that should have taken an hour and consumed my whole weekend? Well, that's a topical thing that someone might call in and talk about, and you invite people into conversation. So I'll write questions in our rundown. Like I'll take a story and I'll ask like 3 questions. So if someone's calling in, I'll ask those questions. And then it takes just from me doing a monologue to me bringing a story, and I'm bouncing it back to a person and coming back and forth and back and forth. More people call, and that's interaction. And so that's essentially what we're trying to do with our radio show. And you can do the same sort of thing on a podcast, even though it's pre-recorded.
That's a great suggestion and great idea. So, Scott, before we let you go, we'll do with one final question, because I know it's getting kind of late for the kids in Eastern Europe. So what kind of advice would you have for these kids as they go off into the world and figure out what kind of paths they want to lead, whether it's something with broadcasting or something completely different? What would you suggest for them to do with their trajectory?
I would say, don't let anybody look down on you because you're young. That's what the Apostle Paul said. and to me, that means don't wait. If you're interested in broadcasting or podcasting or video production, you can do that now. Like, your generation has so many tools and so much software. There's a lot of things that would have cost me $10,000 to get when I was your age, to download those software pieces and get the audio hardware to build a recording studio. But today, with a little M Audio box, or I have this Scarlett, this Scarlett Focusrite box right here that I can record a microphone plugged into. I got a microphone, a cable, I plug that in, it's USB into my computer, and you have broadcast quality equipment. I mean, this thing was like $130 plus the microphone was a couple $100, and then you plug it into a computer. But I can record a radio show or a podcast right into my PC or my Mac just by having a couple $100 worth of hardware that you could put on your Christmas list. You know what I mean? Or with your part-time job, buy a couple pieces of audio. But you can do a podcast now. You can put that on iTunes. You know, it's basically free to get those things going, and then get a friend to, you know, do some graphic design, put a little brand around it, put it online, host it on a website, link to it, or put it on SoundCloud, or, you know, one of those podcast hosting services. Oh, there are some free ones out there, and then there's some that are really cheap that are worthwhile. And, you know, do a podcast now, or call the radio stations in your area and say, hey, can I volunteer, or could I help out setting up the booth at your promotions? Could I just come in and hang out and see what you guys do? Could I job shadow you once? And when you show you're hungry, when you show that that you have a work ethic and you're willing to do whatever it takes to get your foot in the door, there are broadcasters that are looking for young people to help out. And a lot of radio stations don't have big budgets right now anyway, so they need extra workers, they need extra people. And if you bring, you know, your knowledge of social media, and some of these older guys don't know that, and you can help them with that, awesome. Or you can put together a website for them, or update their websites, and you can show them, you can help them. I mean, if you can if you can help someone get what they want, you'll find that people are so gracious to help you. When you're coming from a posture where you're ready to serve, and you're like, hey, is there anything you need in regard to social media, web, or you need an extra person, or you see somebody to come set up or get you coffee, I'll come in and do that. When you say I'll do it for free, at a point they'll realize the value, and then they'll offer to pay you. I wouldn't wait. I would just call radio stations. I'd go to their events and say, hey, how can I help? Can I get involved? And if you do use that Audacity program or the Adobe Creative Suite, you can start creating content now, putting it online, build a podcast, and you can make your own radio show or your own talk show. You get a friend and you just record with each other and edit it down and do that content now.
That's great advice, Scott. And we can't thank you for donating your time and giving us your advice and you know, just your expertise today. So before I end the meeting for all, before I shut it all down, I usually let everyone unmute, and can we all say thank you to Scott Herrold from Hope Media for talking to us about his career and giving you guys professional advice. Thank you so much, Scott. We appreciate you greatly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gracias.